The hallway outside the audition room smelled like old wood, sweat, and nervous hope. Marcus Hale sat at the very end of the row of folding chairs, his guitar case resting against his leg, fingers loosely wrapped around the handle. He had been waiting for nearly 6 hours. Most of the performers who arrived before him were already gone, some smiling, some stiff-faced, some pretending not to care as they walked past the security desk and out into the cold New York afternoon. Marcus stayed. He had learned long ago that being last usually meant being forgotten, but leaving early had never gotten him anywhere either. The audition was for a national touring production, one of those opportunities people talked about as if it were a lottery ticket. Dozens of performers had shown up that morning, trained singers, confident dancers, people with agents, with resumes thick enough to thud when placed on a table. Marcus had none of that. He was a black man in his late 20s, tall and lean, dressed simply, dark jeans, worn boots, a plain jacket, no stylist, no entourage, just a guitar with scratched wood and strings he'd replaced himself the night before. From inside the audition room, bursts of applause spilled out occasionally, sometimes laughter, sometimes nothing at all. Each sound landed in Marcus's chest differently. A woman with a clipboard finally stepped into the hallway. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor. "Last performer," she called, already glancing back toward the door. "Marcus. Hale?" Marcus stood. A few people who had been lingering near the exit looked at him briefly, curiosity flickering, then disappearing. One whispered something to another and smiled. Marcus didn't ask what they said. He followed the woman into the room. The audition space was stark and bright. 3 panelists sat behind a long table, 2 men and 1 woman, all white, all tired. Coffee cups sat half empty, papers were stacked carelessly. One man checked his watch as Marcus walked in. "All right," the woman said briskly. "Let's keep this quick. We're running behind." Marcus nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "What are you performing?" one of the men asked, barely looking up. "An original," Marcus replied. That earned him a look. Brief, unimpressed. The other man sighed quietly. "We're really looking for something that fits the show." Marcus adjusted the strap of his guitar. "I understand," he said. "This does." The woman exchanged a glance with her colleagues. "You have 90 seconds, she said. "Go ahead." Marcus took a breath. He didn't rush. The first chord he played was soft, almost tentative. The panelists barely reacted. One of them reached for his coffee. Then Marcus began to sing. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It didn't beg for approval. It was honest. The room shifted almost immediately. The melody carried weight, like a memory that didn't belong to anyone in particular, but somehow belonged to everyone. His voice held grit and warmth, pain and control. Each lyric landed carefully, deliberately, as if he had lived every word before, daring to sing it out loud. The man with the watch stopped tapping his fingers. The woman leaned forward slightly. Marcus closed his eyes as he played, letting the sound fill the space. He sang about late nights and missed chances, about being overlooked, about standing in line knowing you might never be chosen, and doing it anyway. When the last note faded, silence followed. Not polite silence, real silence. Then one of the men cleared his throat. "Thank you," he said quickly. "That'll be all." Marcus opened his eyes. No smiles, no feedback, no questions, just dismissal. He nodded once, slung the guitar case over his shoulder, and turned toward the door. He had learned not to wait for praise that wasn't coming. As he reached the hallway, he heard one of the panelists mutter, "Good voice, wrong fit." Another replied, "Yeah, doesn't really sell." Marcus kept walking. He stepped outside into the cold air, exhaled slowly, and started down the steps. He didn't know that inside the audition room, the panel hadn't moved on yet, that they were sitting in an uncomfortable quiet they couldn't quite explain. He didn't know that one of them had written his name down twice. All Marcus knew was that he had given them the truth, and walked away like someone who wasn't asking permission anymore. They thought they had dismissed the last performer. They had no idea they had just heard the future headliner. Marcus didn't look back. He walked past the other performers who were still lingering in the hallway, past the security guard who barely glanced up, and out into the street where the city swallowed disappointment the way it always did, quickly, without ceremony. The cold air bit at his face, sharp and grounding. He welcomed it. Cold was honest. He adjusted the guitar case on his shoulder and started walking. For a few blocks, his mind replayed the audition despite his efforts not to let it. The panel's faces, the way they had leaned back instead of forward. The familiar phrase, wrong fit, echoing like a verdict that never came with an explanation. Marcus had heard it before. Too soulful, too raw, not commercial enough, not what we're looking for right now. Those words followed him through years of open mics and near misses, through small gigs where the applause was genuine but never translated into opportunity. He had learned to take the stage without expecting anything back. Expectation hurt more than rejection. He stopped at a corner cafe, the kind with fogged-up windows and a chalkboard menu written by hand. Inside, he ordered a cheap coffee and took a seat near the back, resting the guitar case against the wall. Around him, people talked loudly about jobs and plans and auditions of their own. Everyone sounded certain of something. Marcus stirred his coffee slowly. "It's fine," he told himself. "You did what you came to do." He finished the drink, stood, and headed toward the subway. Life didn't pause just because an audition ended badly. Rent was still due. Gigs still needed booking. Tomorrow night, he'd be playing at a small bar in Brooklyn for tips and a free meal. The city moved on. But inside the audition room, time had stalled. The panel sat quietly for a moment after Marcus left, papers spread out in front of them, the air oddly heavy. The woman with the clipboard frowned, tapping her pen against the table. "Well," she said, breaking the silence, "that was unexpected." One of the men shrugged. "He can sing, no question." "Yeah," the other replied, flipping through his notes. "But I don't see where he fits." The woman didn't answer right away. She stared at the empty space where Marcus had stood, replaying the sound in her head. There had been something in his voice, something that didn't feel like an audition at all. "It felt real," she said finally. The man with the watch scoffed lightly. "Real doesn't sell tickets." "Sometimes it does," she replied. "We just don't like admitting it when it doesn't come wrapped the way we expect." The other man leaned back, arms crossed. "You really think someone like that carries a whole show?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I think audiences are tired of being sold to. I think they want to feel something again." No one spoke. They moved on to the next agenda item, but the mood never fully recovered. Marcus's name stayed on the page, circled twice, refusing to blend in with the others. That evening, as Marcus stepped onto the subway, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Almost. Then he answered. "Hello?" There was a pause. "Marcus Hale?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes." "This is the production office. We wanted to ask if you'd be available to come back tomorrow." Marcus leaned against the subway pole, heart suddenly loud in his chest. "For what?" "Just a conversation," she said carefully. "The panel would like to hear more." The train doors closed. The city blurred past the windows. Marcus closed his eyes for a brief second, steadying himself. "All right," he said. "I can be there." When the call ended, he didn't smile. Not yet. He had learned that doors sometimes opened only to test how badly you wanted to walk through them. But for the first time since the audition, something shifted. Not hope exactly, but recognition. They had dismissed the last performer. Now they were asking him back. And whether they realized it or not, the story was no longer ending the way they thought it would. Marcus arrived the next day with the same guitar, the same jacket, and none of the confidence people usually expected when someone was called back. He had learned not to dress for possibility. Possibility had a habit of disappearing if you trusted it too much. The building felt different this time, quieter, more deliberate. The receptionist looked up when he gave his name and nodded as if she had been expecting him. No clipboard, No waiting line. Just a short walk down the hallway and a door held open a second longer than necessary. Inside, the same panel waited, but the energy had shifted. The coffee cups were fresh, the papers were neatly stacked, all three panelists were paying attention before Marcus even spoke. "Thank you for coming back," the woman said. Her tone was careful now, measured. "Of course," Marcus replied. One of the men leaned forward. "We want to understand what you're trying to do, artistically." Marcus set his guitar case down, but didn't open it. "I'm not trying to do anything," he said. "I'm just telling the truth the way I know how." The man blinked. "That's not usually enough for a show like this." Marcus nodded. "I know." There was a pause, not awkward, evaluative. The woman spoke again. "The concern is scale. Can you carry a room, night after night?" Marcus looked around the space. Then he looked back at them. "I've carried rooms where no one came to hear me," he said calmly. "This would be easier." That landed. One of the men let out a short breath, half laugh, half acknowledgement. "All right," he said. "Play something else." Marcus opened the case. This time he chose a different song. Still original. Still his. But harder. Sharper. It moved faster, cut deeper. His voice rose and fell with intention, not hesitation. He didn't close his eyes this time. He watched them as he played. He saw the shift happen in real time. The woman stopped taking notes. One man leaned back, absorbing it. The other forgot to interrupt. The song ended with a final chord that rang longer than expected. No one spoke. Then the man who had dismissed him the day before said quietly, "If we built the show around you, it would be a different show." Marcus nodded. "That's the point." The woman exchanged a glance with the others. "We didn't think we were looking for that," she admitted. Marcus slung the guitar strap over his shoulder. "Most people aren't," he said, "until they hear it." They asked him about influences, about process, about whether he could adapt without losing himself. Marcus answered honestly. Sometimes the answer was no, sometimes it was not like that. He didn't bend, he didn't perform humility. When the meeting ended, the woman stood. "We have one more audition block today," she said. "But before that, we need to ask you something." Marcus waited. "If we offered you the closing slot for opening night," she said, "would you take it?" He felt the weight of the moment then, but he didn't rush it. "Yes," he said, "if the audience gets the truth." She smiled, this time without calculation. "They will." As Marcus stepped back into the hallway, guitar on his back, he felt the strange calm that comes not from being chosen, but from knowing he didn't change to be. They had dismissed the last performer. Now they were rearranging the stage around him. And the headliner spot was no longer a question of if, only when. Opening night arrived without ceremony. No red carpet, no dramatic announcement, just a quiet adjustment in the program that most people didn't notice until they were already seated. Marcus Hale's name appeared at the bottom of the page, right before the intermission line. Small font, no description, no promise, exactly where headliners usually weren't placed. Backstage, Marcus stood alone, guitar in hand, listening to the muffled sound of the audience finding their seats. Laughter, programs flipping, glasses clinking. The usual noise of people who thought they knew what they had come to see. The opening acts were polished, trained, impressive in the way professionalism often is. The audience applauded politely, appreciatively, but without urgency. Performers bowed and exited. The show moved forward smoothly. Then the lights dimmed again. A stagehand nodded at Marcus. "You're up." He stepped into the light. There was no introduction, no build-up, just a single spotlight and a man with a guitar. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. A couple in the third row whispered. Marcus didn't rush. He played the first chord slowly, letting it settle. Then he sang. The room changed. It didn't happen all at once. It happened person by person. A conversation stopped, a phone lowered, a laugh died halfway out of someone's mouth. His voice carried something the audience hadn't been prepared for. Not spectacle, not perfection, but recognition. He sang like someone who had been waiting his whole life to be heard and had finally decided not to apologize for it. By the second song, the room was silent. Not restrained silence, focused silence. The kind that meant people were leaning in without realizing it. When he finished the third, applause broke out early, loud and uncoordinated, like relief. Backstage, the panel stood frozen near the monitors. "That's not an opening night crowd reaction," one of them whispered. "That's ownership," another replied. Marcus closed with the song he had played at the audition, the one they'd called The Wrong Fit. This time, when the final note faded, the silence lasted a full breath longer than before. Then the audience stood, not everyone at once, but enough, then more, then nearly all of them. The applause didn't stop when he left the stage. It followed him down the wing, echoing against concrete and metal, growing louder instead of fading. The woman from the panel caught up to him, eyes bright. "We need to talk," she said, almost laughing. "Tonight. Now." Marcus nodded. "All right." By the end of the night, the program had already been changed for the following shows. His name moved to the top. Marketing calls were made. A tour manager asked about availability. Marcus didn't celebrate. He packed his guitar carefully, the same way he always did, because he knew this part mattered just as much as the moment on stage, not letting success rewrite who you were before it arrived. As he stepped back out into the night, the city looked the same. Loud, indifferent, full of people chasing something. But this time, Marcus wasn't chasing. They had dismissed the last performer. Now he was the headliner, not because he demanded the spotlight, but because when it finally found him, he knew exactly what to do with it.